and welcome to First Geek 411's book club. Tonight we will be discussing Children of the Nameless by Brandon Sanderson, a Magic the Gathering novel. Before we hop into that, you can find us at all of the places. We are First Geek 411 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Come chat with us on our Discord server or shoot us an email at 1stgeek411 at gmail.com. Watch live on our Twitch every Monday night at 6:45 Mountain Time for our regular podcast, and find all our videos over on YouTube. Check out our sweet, sweet merch at our Redbubble store. I'm Shanine, and with me, I have Emma
Hi.
and Cameron.
Hello, hello.
All right, let's get ready for some takes.
I'm so excited. Yeah, I was telling people before hit show, even if everybody else hates this, I'm so excited for us to get to talk about it.
All right. In this novella, there is a girl named Tisenda who is born with a mysterious power to sing songs of protection, but it also leaves her blind during the day, while her twin sister, who is gifted as a warrior, is blind at night. Their small, isolated town is attacked, and no one but Tisenda is left alive. The perpetrator is believed to be their lord, the man of the manor, controlling Geists. Tisenda goes to kill him or be killed, but is easily restrained by the man, Davriel Cane. It is discovered that Davriel is being framed, and along with his demons, he teams up with Tisenda to discover who is really behind the attacks.
It was the sister all along.
Bum 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 ba da da.
Da da. Da 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 da.
Spoiler
Shocker.
alert.
Yeah,
right.
spoilers in our book club. So,
Yeah.
just by the way, as we discuss the book, there will be spoilers.
That should be a given. It is, in fact, a book club.
What is everyone's first impressions?
It was fine. I didn't love it and I didn't hate it. It had some interesting world lore stuff, but like had it been a full-length novel rather than a novella type scenario, I don't think I would have finished the whole thing.
For me, I read this when it came out in 2018. I was very excited to read this again. Was this just an excuse for me to go to do this again? Possibly. But I really enjoy this. We'll talk more about some of the specifics on why later on. But yeah, I was very excited to read this again and take a look.
And for me, I very much enjoyed the Magic the Gathering lore, and I am still super not a fan of Brandon Sanderson. So
Shocker!
I was really hoping I had just read a bad one the first time, and no, it turns out that's just how he writes.
Yeah, I was curious about that for you, just with this being a novella, if that would be like, well, it's a shorter story, it is a quicker in and out, if that would change your mind on things.
Yeah, I will say I listened to the audiobook version that you shared from that YouTube channel because I was having a very hard time bringing myself to read it.
I did the audiobook as well, so you're good.
Listening to it was much easier. All right. What previous familiarity do you have with Magic the Gathering lore?
0.
Yeah, Emma's goose eggs.
2 big fat goose eggs. Aside from staring at the stacks of cards on the living room coffee table as my roommate sorted her cards. And I would stare at the pretty pictures and go, ooh, what does that one do? I'd not understand a single word that would come out of her mouth after the fact.
Fair.
Janine, what about you? I'll go last.
I think I'm gonna be basically right in between the both of you. I have enjoyed dabbling in Magic the Gathering, I guess we'll say, and am familiar with a little bit of the lore. I can recognize like a lot of the big characters and things like that. There's maybe like a couple of stories that I know a little bit about. I attempted reading another Magic the Gathering novel a few years ago. I didn't even manage to finish that one.
Do you know which one it was?
It was the first book in the War of the Spark series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say jumping in, I keep up with Magic the Gathering as a whole. I am by no means like a lore master, but I know a lot of what goes on in the stories. For the ones I don't keep up with, I listen to podcasts where they talk about it, and so I definitely have a pretty good understanding of the lore that goes on there. And so, as someone who did not read the books that went along with the War of the Spark, those are kind of considered like the low points of modern Magic lore. And so, like when I like brought this book to y'all, I said it's probably the best modern Magic book. Unfortunately, that's not much of a competition. Because most Magic lore is short stories, like a couple of 1,000-word like blog posts basically, and there are many of them that are fantastic. They did a great one about two of the characters meeting up and kind of having this nice little side story, and it was really cool. And so like they have some great stuff like separate from the main narrative as well. But in terms of the actual Magic novels, yeah, there's not necessarily a lot in modern times. That's something that they used to do a lot, but they've kind of shied away from the major books lately. But yeah, so definitely know quite a bit, and I'm excited to. I don't want to say quiz because that kind of makes it like there's a right and wrong answer. There are certain things that I want to ask y'all about once we get to the world building questions that Shanine has, where I'm just kind of curious to what all you picked up on.
I am going to fail miserably.
But yeah, with that, yeah. So I'm excited. We'll see how it goes.
Why are angels considered monsters with no soul?
We'll get there in world building.
Great. That is my one.
That's literally one of the things I was going to ask about.
Great. Because I am asking that as a legitimate question.
All right. And we have read, I'm thinking The Ruby's Curse is another like fandom novel that we have read. Are there any others that we've done for book club?
I don't think so. Let me go check the other ones real quick.
I mean, we've done Letters from Saint Nick.
I'll just say if you say Ready Player One, I'm gonna freak out.
Yes, Cameron.
I'm just
and Ready Player 2.
I'm just gonna be so sad. Like
the torture that was both of those books. The second one specifically. Oliver, get off my desk.
We did do it kind of depends on how you define like the fandom books. Like we did do The Last Wish, but like we came to that as people that had watched the show, although that is the source material. Yeah. So it's like
no, I wouldn't count that.
Yeah. And then other than that, not really. There's nothing else that we've read that like we've read comics and stuff like that, but there's never been anything else that
we've read the source material
for the majority
rather
of things.
Than stuff that has been created after the fact.
Yeah. All right. So either Ruby's Curse or anything else you have read, fandom or fan fiction type things. How does this compare to those things?
I've read a couple of different like Doctor Who novels or novellas, whatever you want to call them. Like chapter books, adventures. And I think I enjoyed those quite a bit more than this, but that might just also partially come from the fact that they're Doctor Who, and I was already invested in that show and had like character context. But they were also just like fun, like additional adventures for, like incarnations of the Doctor that didn't necessarily get a lot of on-screen time or whatever. I quite enjoyed those. But this was kind of fun in terms of just getting an introduction to the general world of magic. It's a little confusing in places, not having any context, but still fun.
Yeah, for me, I'm sure there's like this list of things that I've read that are fandom things, but off the top of my head, none of those have been recent, and so I don't necessarily have a lot to compare this to. I will say, as much as I really did enjoy Ruby's Curse, I'm not going to say this is a knock against that book, but one of the things that I like about this is it feels way more self-contained. In the sense that like there are a bunch of like little references to the bigger magic lore, but they're just like little one-off statements. Whereas Ruby's Curse, I feel like it does require you to understand a bit more about like timey-wimey shenanigans. Who is the Doctor, even though the Doctor isn't in the book. It kind of requires you to understand a bit more of those things for how like the metaphysics of the world works. Whereas I feel like this one kind of is just like, there's magic. It happens. And so they're not
It
really
is a thing.
Yeah, they're not really like set in stone on defining like the metaphysics of this compared to something like Doctor Who.
Yeah, I think similarly to what Emma was saying, the other fandom things that I've read have been from fandoms that I'm more invested in or more knowledgeable about. So they're, I don't know, easier to understand, easier to get into for the most part. But yeah, with this one being such like you said, a self-contained, like small, relatively small scale story for where they could have gone with Magic the Gathering. Um, it works well even if you don't know a ton of magic lore. Like it's just this one story in this one town. you, yeah. Hey, what was your favorite part?
So I really love Davriel interacting with his demons. Like that was really the part that like I recall like kind of looking back on it, and I just love their dynamic.
I was gonna refer to the specific part at the end, Cameron, about the tea, the tin of tea. I'm trying to find it. Where he's just like, you lied to me, Merlindy. It's, or however you say it. Technically, that's not a demon, but you have kept terrible secrets from me. I found an entire tin of Verlacian dust willow in your cupboard. I expect you to explain yourself post haste. Also, there's an angel in the basement. But yes. I feel like his interactions with other people in general, he was an enjoyable character.
Yeah. This book introduced Davriel to like the wider world of magic, and like this is his first appearance. Davriel didn't even have a card yet at the time that this novel came out. They later would print his card for the first time in War of the Spark. And so, uh, as something that was like a completely new character, a lot of people that like Davriel, like myself, like him because of this book and how well these interactions are. Like he's such a snarky, like black in the sense of the magic color, color pie black villain, or hero, I guess technically. But he is super fun in that regard, and like I said, his interactions with the demons is like it's so weird and it's so like unique in that regard that um, that's kind of like my favorite part is anytime we get to see him interacting with the party.
I think for me, my favorite part, I don't, it's not like anything specific really, but just any of the little like magic lore tidbits, like people's different abilities and things are really cool and interesting. Basically anything that was like, oh, I wish I knew more about that because it sounds cool.
Yep. Like the whole ink
Mm-hmm.
spread thing.
Yep. Yeah, the spell that lets him like write on the walls with magic
Yeah.
ink, and then yeah,
Like, I mean, I feel like that was decently explained, but it seemed like something that would be fun to play around with
yeah,
more.
yeah. And I'll say there, I'm a sucker for one of the places magic even criticizes itself is because since in the game you have an opponent and you have to get their life to zero, magic tends to be very combat focused. We have pyromancers, we have like stuff like that. And so anytime we get references to like non-combat magic, I'm always very excited for what that is. Uh, just like in a magical world, you would have spells that would help you write. Like that's just something that you would have. And so very cool to see like that represented, especially in like in a unique and well, in an interesting way. Not exactly unique, but
You can make it unique, though.
yeah, exactly. You can take something that feels relatively normal and be like, oh, we're gonna scare people by writing on the walls, but with magic.
Yeah.
Favorite parts or highlights?
I'm trying to figure out where it is.
Is there other favorite parts? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I like the end. I think it's very interesting once we start to get a lot of stuff about what's going on with the bog, and we actually like start to get that explained. I think that that's very cool. I kind of like. They're not necessarily like the most shocking motivations ever, but I do really like once we start to get the sisters like why she is doing this. For Willia, um, I think that that's really interesting. Like you have this person that has like had faith in this one thing, uh, and then has kind of gone to this other place, found out that it's not what she expected, and is now like almost like radicalized the other way.
Yep.
And like kind of having this force through Willia, whatever. We see Tacinda's exact same conflict of like, well, who do you trust? What do you believe? And I think that that's very interesting.
Specific moment, because I actually within that is the guy who gets completely just like turned to ash in that initial interaction with the sister, where you start to figure out what's happening with her. For whatever reason, I know it sounds horrible, but it just kind of made me laugh. I think it had to do with the way it was just written, of just the guy that gets, you know, decimated in that whole interaction. Because it's like, oh yeah, everyone else throws a shield up or whatever. And then this one poor guy, Crunchnar, or however you say his name, just gets vaporized. And I'm like, oh, you poor fellow. You poor guy. Like, but at the same time, like, there wasn't really much we could do to help you there.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna sort of sit here and laugh about it for a moment. I guess that was more of just a thing that stood out rather than being a favorite part. But
All right. Least favorite parts.
I'm not huge on the beginning. Like, I
it's
know,
very expository.
yeah. Like y'all even like made fun of it like in our like podcast host chat, or maybe it was like at the end of one of the other episodes. But man, I do not think the first like several pages does a lot of justice for what's going on here. I definitely think it comes off as very like generic fantasy.
Well, just generic summarizing as well.
Yeah, because
Oh
like
yeah, you've got twin sisters.
right,
One can only see during the day, the other can only see during the night. Oh, one of them finds she has magic powers where she can protect the town when she sings.
yeah, yeah. It kind of strikes me as the like this is supposed to be way more gripping than it actually comes off.
Is
Of like there were two kinds of darkness, and Tacinda feared the second far more than the first. It's like okay,
the thing
okay,
about that also made me laugh hysterically about that specifically is that it literally, I don't know where it is. Oh, here it is not word for word, but a solid replication of the opening of the Name of the Wind, the introduction, that literally starts talking about um, multiple kinds of silence. Exact same concept. Um, the Waystone Inn lay in silence, and it was silence of three parts. And it's a whole, like, the prologue is a whole, like, page and a half about the kinds of silence that hang out in this inn. But I was just sitting there reading that part you just quoted, Cameron, going, you know, Patrick Rothfuss did this exact same concept, a lot more beautifully written. Like, you had a solid example to go off of there, and it just doesn't work as well. Also, this copy is signed, and I love it. Different book, but I love it because that's one of my favorite books. Okay, but it made me laugh because it made me think of of the Name of the Wind, and it was just like we've seen this exact idea done fairly well, and this did not feel like it was executed to the extent that he had hoped for it to be executed. Let's see. I'm trying to find. I feel like the weird, like the entity chit chat inside the head was a bit weird at times and just didn't fit in. Like there was just moments where it showed up with Davriel, and it was like, okay, you don't really necessarily need this chit chat here, and it pulled me out. But I think that was a very nitpicky thing for me, because like that has to be done well for it to work.
All right. As I previously stated, I'm not a huge fan of Brandon Sanderson and his writing style, which I feel bad about because he's a very prolific and like well loved author, and I just don't get it. I was thinking about it earlier, and I'm like Aaron from The Office with Holly. And I'm like, I don't get it. Can he cook? Um, I just, his writing style is not my favorite. I feel like the way that well, all of the characters are portrayed are somewhat contradictory, and the way that they speak and sometimes act does not really coincide with the portrait of the character he's been presenting. Um, Dialogue in particular, I struggled with. I felt like the dialogue was either expository or just
Mm-hmm.
completely unnecessary. And it's just like nobody said anything of importance, like the entire novel, basically. Like maybe 2 lines of dialogue. I was like, oh, that was not bad. But that's not like a good ratio for 220 pages. Um, and
Yeah.
I felt like all of the characters had the exact same speaking style,
Mhm.
where they were all, regardless of age, um, being supernatural and immortal, being like, I don't like, they all were just sassy teenagers the whole time. And it was not that interesting for me. Like, it really could have just been like this friend group, like
The
teenagers
real treasure was the clones we made
Yeah.
along the way.
quipping back and forth the whole time. And I'm like, I mean, sometimes it's funny to make like a demon be like sassy and things, but to have every character have the same sass and sarcasm was like, it was too much. Yeah, that that's me.
100%.
Yeah, I definitely feel
Adam
like there's a
Brown.
lot where you could like a lot of dialogue that you could sub out who said it within the group, and it would like, especially between like Davriel and Hightower, like if they're like as like they're like explaining the world or something to Cinda, I feel like you could very easily have swapped out who was discussing what there.
Yep.
A lot of times when it's the like, I'll kind of say like I feel like the way that Davriel and his group of demons comes across when they're interacting with other people, they're very much all presented the same. Like I feel like they have a more unique voice in their own bubble. But even then, like again, Davriel and Miss Hightower are very similar compared to like Conchnar. Um, but like, uh, but yeah, I definitely feel like there's like especially like bubbles of characters that are like, yep, here is the bubble. They all talk the same if it's these characters in the bubble.
Yep. It is the same group of people. who has been secluded forever and ever to develop their own pattern of speech. Ta-ta.
I guess speaking of characterization, what did you think of Tasenda and Davriel?
We were talking about this pre-show. Tacinda got the rough end of the deal here.
Yeah, Tasenda
Like
felt
there are two types of
also.
darkness, and Tacinda got the worst end of the darkness, and so
You can only see it.
yeah. So like Tacinda can only see at night, and very much just has this like basically forced to be nocturnal, and like man, it's like the rough end of the deal there. And then like Tacinda also like in the span of like I don't know 12 hours has literally her whole world shaken. Um like not even just to the extent of like oh the bog tricked us, but like to the extent that the bog is this extremely powerful metaphysical like organism that is just chilling here, and like just like that degree of stuff is just like insane. Um, and yeah, she like very much like has that struggle. I do like her as a representation of what like a cool bard could be. Like she kind of has this like fun protector bard kind of thing going on, which I think is a very fun way. Like we even get to see it in like smaller scale when she's like just playing music, it affects the demons. And like that's like super cool to see that it's not just like this super charismatic bard that like we're so used to seeing. Um, yeah, and so like I like that side of it. Again, kind of to Shanine what you were just saying, like not necessarily the best dialogue or anything like that when it comes to that side of it, but like she's a character that I hope that we will get a return to at some point, but we don't know for sure.
Definitely agree. Swallowed spit down the wrong pipe there.
Yeah, I'm glad you're okay.
Yes, obviously. I definitely felt like Tasenda was a bit flat, but you know, similar to what you were just saying, Cameron, like she definitely had her moments of being interesting and a cool bard
Mm-hmm.
and like really did get the sucky end of the stick in terms of being a set of twins, being part of a pair of twins and getting that end of everything. And then to, you know, have slash discover your sister, surprise, your twin, was the one who killed your parents. Fun stuff.
Yeah.
Not ideal for anyone. Um, I think I enjoyed Davriel more than Tasenda, however you want to
Whatever
say
your
it.
heart tells you.
Tasenda, whatever. Um, just because he seemed a bit more my type in terms of like characters I tend to relate more to in that regards or just connect with interest wise. Um, and his whole interactions with the demons and like being a bit I feel like the snarkiness and sassiness like fit his character of all of them the most. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think writing aside, I did find them both to be very interesting characters. Um, I don't know, Tasenda was just like a cool female character with really interesting abilities that would definitely be fun to see more of. Um, yeah, And I think we got a little bit of her during the day when she was blind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think having more of that than just like one story that takes place mostly at night would be cool as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, Davriel, he's so mysterious. And there's so much backstory that I'm so intrigued about.
He very much has the Robert California thing of
Yeah.
like who do you think I am? You don't even know my real name. Like,
Yes.
he just like has that energy. But
Yep. But yeah, I don't know. They were both interesting, and it would be cool to see them more outside of this novella.
mm-hmm. I want to say here, I also love that we get to see Davriel as this like demon, like contract writer thing, and he is just taking advantage of the demons left and right. Like, I think it is such a fun way of seeing that dynamic of like this guy's got it. Like, he's out here making all these deals. All the demons are fighting over his soul, and he is just coming out on top. Like, it's really funny to like kind of see that twist on it, where like we are led to believe that he fully knows what he is doing, and is in like such good control over all of this that he can just do the whole like that he can handle this and not get caught. In terms of which demons he is like his soul is being under contract with, but I love that.
Man, the day he dies is going to be a bit of chaos.
Yeah. Or dies again.
Or dies again. Well, yeah. You know, like dies
Re-dies.
for good. Yeah. The day his soul gets claimed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any favorite side characters?
I really like Miss Hightower.
Yeah.
I think of the, I mean, she definitely has the most, but she's the seductress that is basically Davriel's accountant, and I just think that that's hilarious. And I love that like of all the demons, they all also seem to be just like okay with this situation. And she's just kind of like, I'll share a quote about it later on. But I just love that she's kind of like, yep, I'm here and I'm good with it. Like, I'm just here keeping up with the books.
It was kind of the landlady from Sherlock.
Oh, yeah.
What's her name? Kind of her vibes, but in a demon state. Miss Hudson. Miss Hudson vibes, but make it a demon bookkeeper. Let's see. I mean, honestly, I just think Davriel's the most interesting. I wouldn't really say I was too attracted to any of the, or interested in any of the side characters aside from what you were just saying, Tony.
Tony. Give me my Iron Man suit. Like, let's go.
You spend enough time with your sister and brother-in-law taking care of their newborn infant, and you just go completely haywire. Cameron. About whatever her name is.
Miss Hightower.
Yeah, Miss Hightower. Infants, man. They mess with your head.
Yeah. I think we obviously saw out of the side characters the most of Miss Highwater. Um,
Yeah, definitely not Tower. Definitely Highwater.
and yeah, I guess it was Crunchnar with the riddles, right? No, the other one. I can't remember its name, but the one with the riddles, I thought that was like a funny backstory to that demon pact.
Bree-Rig.
Yeah. But I guess that's more of just like an interesting little backstory bit than an actual like interesting side character necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Speaking of other characters we didn't really see a lot of, thoughts on our villain Willia.
So I'm gonna echo Shanine what you had just said about wishing we got to see more of like what the day looked like. Um, to me, that's my biggest gripe with Willia, is it's not a twist that she's still alive. Like we have no reason to care. It's just like, oh, okay. And I feel like kind of like when we read Secret Identity, and it was the like, was this supposed to be a mystery? Like I kind of felt that way with like, were we supposed to be surprised that Willia was alive? Not that I necessarily like saw it coming the first time I read it, but like it just felt like, yep, sure, she's alive. Let's go. Like got stuff to do. I wish that there
Yeah.
was more to that with her building her up.
Well, there needed to be more of a relationship between the twins from
Mm-hmm.
the start, from the very start. Instead, you get right off the bat, oh yeah, twins, one of them only sees during the day, the other only sees during the night. Magical powers, and then attack. And everyone dies. You don't really see the relationship between the two twins or, you know, what that looks like. So, Willia's supposed death doesn't mean anything to us. So we don't really care that she's dead or disappeared or whatever until she shows back up again. And it's like, oh, okay. The last third of the book. Hey, this character we know very little about is, aside from being the twin sister of the main
Mm-hmm.
character and having mirror opposite, powers or whatever. Whoop de doo. She's the bad guy. Jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands. Like,
What? One of my first notes that I took is kind of a waste to kill the twin sister right off the bat. Like, a little
yeah.
weird to give them like yin yang powers and then
Yeah.
just like off the other one. And then, yeah, we find out she's alive. And I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If I had thought about it for like 5 seconds, I probably would have figured it out. But
Yeah. Because I feel like the tell there is supposed to be that when Tacinda starts to lose her vision again, that's supposed to be the tease that Willia is still alive. But we have because we haven't spent any time dwelling on that.
Yeah.
And we have no reason to believe that her power would have been returned to the bog once they've started to kind of figure out that that's how it's working.
Yeah.
We still have no reason to believe that Tacinda wouldn't still go blind at night. And so it feels like we could have done more building that out.
Yeah. Because it hasn't been established that that's how the capabilities function, essentially.
Right.
How are they gonna know? No one's gonna know. But how would they know?
All right, let's get on to world building. Any standout piece of world building / lore?
Why are angels monsters and why don't they have a soul?
Okay. So we can hop into question time with Cameron. So, Shanine, since this is Emma's question as well, why don't angels have a soul? Similarly, why don't demons? I guess, but you know.
Not created beings. I don't know.
Yeah, so this is like a big running magic lore piece that is so angels and demons in magic lore are beings of pure mana, and as a result they don't have a soul. They're not technically like a living being in the sense of like a human is a living being, and so they're kind of reflections of like the pure manifestation of the mana. And so and like certain parts of magic, like angels literally just appear as like the world needs them, and so they kind of will just like essentially like spawn in as like there's not children angels. It's like the birds work for the bourgeoisie kind of thing. Of it's just like,
We
oh
need to change the batteries and the
yeah,
crows on the lawn of the,
exactly,
parliament today or whatever.
right. And so that's why angels don't have souls, is because they're almost like a magical robot. Like they definitely have a personality. They're not robotic, but just because it's just like how they're made. It's like their nature. Um, Also in magic, almost all angels are female. There's a very small exception to that, but and then kind of so that's kind of one of those things that's also something going on there. But other questions I had for y'all. What is a plane? Plane.
Different levels of not reality, but like reality. Like the Fey realm in D&D in comparison to the whatever the term is for others. Or like on Yggdrasil. Like
Like the nine realms.
yeah. Kind of like that. At least that's how I picture it in my head.
Multiversal places.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Emma, it's very funny that you use Yggdrasil as an example because that's actually part of like current magic lore. Is one of the bad guys has basically made dark Yggdrasil and is trying to connect all of the planes together. But yeah, so
I like my Norse mythology, so
yeah, and that's actually based off of the Norse mythology set that they did. And so that's kind of where that current like story point is coming from. And then yeah, Shanine's spot on. There are these, and one of the things that separates magic from like D&D is that it is almost impossible to travel from one plane to another. Whereas like in D&D, a powerful enough wizard or sorcerer, I don't know who can cast the spell, can travel from one plane, like the material plane, to the fire plane or whatever. In magic, that's not really possible. Which leads me to my next question. What is a planeswalker? And who are our planeswalkers in this story?
Oh, Lauren taught me about the planeswalkers. Because I asked her, I was looking at a card, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Either that or I had a conversation with you, Cameron, about what they were. But I can't remember.
The only ones who can travel between planes.
Yeah. Yeah, so and that's why the Yggdrasil thing that's going on right now is such a big deal, is it's providing non-planeswalkers a way to travel between planes. But yeah, so mathematically, if you're not a planeswalker, there is no way to travel between planes. there technically are, but like they all come with like crazy caveats of like you have to be dead, that kind of thing. And there is like one character that has like this magical device that can transport things between planes. But it takes a toll on the person traveling, and so like organic matter cannot travel between planes, except by this world tree thing that's going on. And so yeah. So then here, who are our planeswalkers in the story?
The
Davriel.
demons?
Yeah. So Davriel is the planeswalker. That's the one that we kind of get to see the most about it. Is Tacinda a planeswalker?
I would say at the end she is. But up until that point, maybe not.
I don't know. My husband seemed to know who I was talking about when I said she was one of the characters in the book. So I'm guessing yes.
So when he was doing an AMA for this, Brandon said that he was given permission to make one new planeswalker, and was Davriel. And then he wants Tacinda to be a planeswalker. She isn't, because he's not allowed or was not allowed to create a second planeswalker. But that is very clearly what he is trying to do at the end.
Yep.
Is setting her up of like, and here's this other interesting bard character. You should make them a planeswalker card, and even though I'm not allowed to tell you that, and so yeah, so there's one of the big like kind of fandom things with this is kind of that question of like, is Tacinda a planeswalker or not? Because it seems to be that she's being set up that kind of like Davriel, she has this ability to kind of be governed by, or has this ability because of the bog to travel between planes. And so, and then another one I have for you is, I kind of wrote this one down because I was going to ask a question about this, but I think it's too crazy. What did y'all think about the idea of like the souls of dead planes being like the entity and then the bog? What did y'all think about that?
I think it's an interesting, like, the place that my head went to was like in the real world, meaning the universe. You've got, like a star explodes and it collapses in on itself and turns into a black hole and sucks in all this other material, and then like presumably like it all then gets turned into other stuff eventually somehow, like just in and of how the universe functions as we know it, like things collapse over time and die or whatever, and then all of that material gets like reconstituted back into the universe and made into other stuff. And in some ways it's like stardust. Like that thing still exists in a sense. It just exists in something else now. And it's like dead planes, it's kind of a similar thing. You just end up with side effects that aren't necessarily always desirable. Like, you get a plane that dies, and it just sort of seeps into another plane and causes problems for everyone involved for a while. And then you have twins
Who somehow become
who,
these super powerful
like,
entities, like,
play swapsies with being blind. I thought it was an interesting concept, basically.
I think that must have been a tidbit that I missed in audiobook form. But definitely an interesting concept. And then, like, there's a lot of questions there too, like where did you come from? Why are you the way that you are?
Number one, how dare you?
And yeah, I don't know. I love how, I guess, intertwined all of the magic lore can be, and just all of the threads you can follow throughout all of the planes.
Mm-hmm.
So
This is a fun one because, like, in the rest of Magic, there's the idea of a world soul, which is basically the idea that a plane is actually alive, alive in like air quotes, but like that a plane itself has a personality and has feelings and an understanding of what's going on it.
Kind of like the concept of Mother Nature.
Yes, exactly. And so there are specific characters that can actually talk to the world soul of a plane. And sometimes the world soul becomes like personified by something like a giant dragon. Other times, or I guess it's an avatar technically. Other times it may just like spawn an elemental that kind of speaks for the plane. And so it's kind of an interesting thing because since Magic tends to not like to destroy places that they can go back to make money, it's kind of fun that we kind of get this like what is the extreme version of this thing that like and kind of going off what Emma said, the idea that like energy is not created or destroyed, it just changes form. And so when the plane dies, it doesn't really die, it just becomes this other thing, and then presumably goes somewhere around the multiverse to go and hide. I think that that's really interesting. We haven't gotten to see a lot more of that other than this book, but it's kind of an interesting like implication. Some other tidbits. There's some interesting references to kind of some deep magic lore. So this takes place after the Shadows over Innistrad's story, which is where basically all the angels get crazy or go crazy because an eldritch terror attacks the plane and essentially drives everyone mad. And so it gets summoned there basically for revenge from one of our characters.
Like Cthulhu mad, or like lack of medical knowledge mad?
Cthulhu mad. Like driven
Okay.
insane.
Okay.
Yeah, like eldritch horror mad.
Yeah.
Good clarification. And so that's what essentially happens. And in this, they reference the moon changing. The moon is where her name is Imrakul, and she essentially binds herself into the plane or into the moon of the plane. So when it talks about the moon changing, it's like an interesting reference to that part of the story. They also reference the Hell Vault. Highwater talks about being imprisoned in silver. The Hell Vault is a piece of the moon that actually is used as a prison for angels and demons. And so it gets broken at the end of the first Innistrad story. And so that's an interesting reference. We get a reference for how some demons have hooks for hands. That's a specific demon named Gristlebrand that has hooks for hands. And then we get a reference to the previous Lord of the Manor being a Markov. That is a family of vampires that lives on the plane. It's probably one of the most prominent vampire families. There's Soren Markov is another planeswalker who is obviously a Markov. And so it's an interesting reference there. And then, did y'all pick up on the constant references to hats?
Like once?
Okay. I would like you to direct your attention. So this is a really fun art call out because they have awesome hats on Innistrad. And so this is one that like, does this really matter? No, but it makes me happy that it gets referenced here. And so I'm going to put some hats up on the screen that I would like to draw your attention to.
I would love that hat.
Yeah. And so these are all characters on Innistrad. And yeah, they all have very cool hats. And so,
Also a dope hat.
um, and then our last one that I got is this hat. But yeah, there are some A plus hats on Innistrad. And did this need to be referenced here? No, literally not at all. But I love that throughout the book, Davriel compliments the hats multiple times. Um, I know it
Do you
happens
like
twice.
my
It might
hat?
happen 3 times, but he talks about how the church has cool hats. Um,
Yes, I think that's the one of the times that I was like, this guy talks about hats a lot.
yeah. And it's, again, it's just like this super random reference to the fact that there's a bunch of really cool hats on Innistrad. And like, they don't need to go that hard on the hats here, but I love that it gets called out.
You didn't have to go that far, but you did.
Exactly, exactly. Um, it's one of those that, like, as somebody who's like a fan and like reading this, it makes me happy because because I know Brandon Sanderson is a Magic fan. Like, he plays the game, he actually, like, he knows what's up, and it's one of those details that there's no way he was asked to reference the hats.
Yeah.
But like, it's kind of that, like, you're one of us because you get this super niche reference that almost no one else would think to make, and you're just out here referencing the hats, and I'm here for it.
All the small references.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Who were the people that attacked Davriel and company in the church at like the very first attack?
Mm-hmm. So I think they're supposed to be Cathars, who are essentially just people that work for the church. Like, one of our people is Rom. Yeah. And I think he's supposed to be like an old retired Cathar. And when I say like work for the church, like, basically, like, it's not like, it's more like Van Helsing kind of stuff. Like, these are not like priests. These are like warrior monk, not even monk kind of thing. That's a bad example. But like warrior monster hunter, like, go and fight back the monsters with the sign of Avacyn, kind of thing. Like, these are not just like, and so it's because of kind of like the nature of the plane. Like, you have, like, that's kind of how the magic of the church protects those around it. And so, yeah, I don't think it's like a specific reference to anything other than they're Cathars that work for the church, and they're supposed to be hunting demons. And so here's Davriel with his demons, and
They are doing their job.
yeah.
I will say, for world building in general, I think Sanderson lays out like a really interesting world. And I thought that it had like a good foundation of like where this story was taking place. And that part was very interesting to me.
I think I said this before, so y'all might already have the answer. So, but all planes in Magic have like a shtick. So there's Kaldheim, that is like loosely based on Norse mythology. Got there. There's Theros, that is Greek or Roman mythology. There's Tarkir, which is like East Asia meets dragons. And so there's like all the kind of these like twists on mythologies. What is Innistrad's shtick?
The only thing I can think of is like Arthurian mythos. Sword in the Stone. Yeah, vampires. I kind of clump vampires in with that for whatever reason, even though they are their own thing. Um, yeah.
So Innistrad is your classic horror tropes plane. And so, like, that's why vampires are such a prevalent part. We don't really see them here, but werewolves are an extremely important part of the plane. Um, it's basically like the worst place to be if you're a human. Um, and if you're not a human, hey, there's a bunch of humans here that you can eat. Um, and so it's yes, like that's kind of the shtick. And so there's like geists are, I mean, obviously a big part of the story as well, but the idea that like your spirit will like physically manifest on this plane and start attacking other things. Uh, Again, we get references to zombies through the novel. We don't really see any, but those are kind of like the main things. There's a character who's the Fly, um, from like that classic movie and book, and so yeah, so it's very just like classic horror tropes, um, and that's why like they talk about like essentially if you're a human, your job is to have kids so that humans don't literally get wiped off the plane.
Yep.
That's kind of like you're just trying to survive. Like you don't die of old age on Innistrad, like that kind of thing.
Death by animal attack.
Yeah.
Death by monster attack. Fun fact, my cute little baby nephew does zombie arms when he's sleeping.
Oh.
It's very cute.
All right. I have a quote. The people of the village learned of the girls' inverse curses and noted them as marked. It was the bog's touch upon them, the people whispered. A good thing. It meant the twin girls had been claimed, blessed. I think the novella talks quite a bit about curses and blessings, um, as well as finding strength or gifts in the midst of hardship. What are your thoughts on those themes?
Shout out to the people being right here. Like this is definitely one of those lines that like you look back on, it's like, oh, that was actually exactly what happened. But like reading through this, not knowing like what's really going on, it's just like, oh, that's a weird superstition. But nope, they were literally correct. Um, but
Yep.
yeah, I think that this is interesting, and we get to see this especially towards the end with Willia. The idea that like as much as like Tacinda got the bad end of the stick with the curse, like Willia is still just is even more so defined by fear. And what is seen, like obviously Tacinda doesn't like going blind for half the day either, but like Tacinda seems to have a much more grasp on the blessing that that provides to her at night for her village versus Willia, who seems way more just like afraid of what this is. And so I like that kind of through the two of them, we get we could see it more as a blessing through one and more of a curse through the other. And it would have been
Yeah.
cool if we would have seen more during the day. So we got to see that lived out more.
It's as much a like yin yang in, you know, the commentary on blessings and curses as it is in like the duality of what they do or do not have. Like it's there's always two sides to a coin. There's always two sides to a scenario. Like one person's going to get the short end of the stick and the other person's going to be holding the stick, regardless of whether or not they are the one who picked up the stick to begin with, or if they were born with the stick, I guess.
You know?
Whatever. You know, you just sometimes gotta run with the metaphors that you show up with and all that jazz. Um, and it's just like the thing that I'm thinking of is people. The thing that we see often is people who have more are often more paranoid about losing the more that they have. So they often go out of their way to protect the more that they have, to not lose the more that they have, whatever the more is. Um, Whether or not it is intentional, and it's kind of seen, I mean, it is seen with Wylea in some ways of like trying to maintain as much of her eyesight as possible, um, to the detriment of others. And that is a mental curse for a physical blessing.
Mm.
To which her sister has the worst end of the deal, like you were saying, Cameron, and still like blessing her family and friends with protection. She takes what she has and she's like, great, I'm gonna use my talents and help my people because I love them. And her sister's like, I need more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting, like, commentary on the two sides of blessings and curses.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to choice because they did have very similar things happen to them. Um, but it's about where they decide to go from there. Um, there's a quote at the end as well, to Senda talking to the soul of the nameless angel, I think. Um, and she says, that is the secret to Senda. What do you do when the night grows cold and the darkness comes for you? I think, yeah, like the darkness is always going to come one way or another. And it's about what you do in those moments. Are you going to find your strength, or, like Cameron was saying, act out of fear? Right. Which leads us into our next quote. Lord Davriel told me earlier that my people talk too much about destiny. He said I should stand up for myself and decide my own path, rather than believing in things like fate. She looked toward Rom to find light from the seal and stone flowing across his face. What do you think? He asked. I don't know, she said. Seems to me that it's basically impossible to choose for yourself. I mean, if I do what Davriel says, how is that any different from doing what my village tells me? That's not independence. It's just choosing a different influence. What does Sanderson have to say about fate and destiny?
Yeah. So I really loved this quote. This is one that I was very excited that you had in the notes. Like this is one of those I feel like it's very telling, and I feel like the idea of with it ends, it's just choosing a different influence. Like I feel like that's like the challenge, and we see this a lot in stories about fate and destiny. Is that in the end you don't really have a choice? Like it doesn't matter if it's free will. It doesn't matter if it's destiny. Like you end up being, for better or for worse, like pulled to this one specific fate. And I kind of like that Tacinda, as like a teenager, has already kind of figured that out, especially when it comes to what Innistrad is about. That in the end, kind of all you can do is what the best that you can with where you are. um, and like the power that she has, and just changing her worldview doesn't change the fact that, especially if she's not a planeswalker, it doesn't change the fact that she is still plane bound and literally can't change anything on the wider scale of things. Um, and all that she can do is kind of fight for what she can there in the approaches.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it just makes me think of, and going back to God of War slash that whole like sort of story arc trope where it plays with the idea of, well, if you know the ending of your story and you don't like it, or if you know you or someone you care about is going to die, are you going to try to avoid that ending, but as a result cause that ending?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you just gonna let it play out, therefore causing the ending? Like this whole like bootstraps paradox type scenario, um, if you will. Um, but honestly, like it was kind of nice for this book, I mean, to have to Cinda be the kind of character who's like, I'm just gonna go with the flow instead of like, because we so often see it where characters are, try to push back against their destiny or fate or whatever because they don't like it. Um, but here she's just like, okay, like, sure, let's go for it, or just whatever. Like, I'm not gonna try and change what has yet to happen. Um, I'm just gonna try and get revenge for my entire village being slaughtered. And I think that's a valuable thing of like, it's important to put work into your future, but it's also important to like, if fate or destiny are things, then like you put in the work and then what good comes out of the work will come back to you.
I think in stories that deal with fate, we get like one of two things where it's like you can't fight your fate. It is pushing you where you're going, whether you're fighting it or not. And then the other side is like an empowering, like you choose your own fate type story. And I think with this, yeah, it's different. There was, I guess, an acceptance of her fate the whole time. But yeah, that the choice wasn't, do I choose my fate or not, but it was choosing that no matter where your fate takes you, like what's important to you. And that's where you get a choice. We have touched a little bit on this, but any other thoughts on the ending?
Much better than the beginning.
Yes. Yep. I think one of the places that this struggles is that it has to fit into the wider narrative of the Magic story and what was going on at the time. Like, had this been like a more proper novel, I think it would have been very interesting if we would have seen the nameless angel before um, she's driven mad by Emrakul. and actually get to see a bit of like that effect on the world. But we don't really get to see that. We kind of, even if it was like pre and then we get a time skip kind of thing, I think getting to see that would have been really interesting. But we don't, since we don't really get any background, I think that it was kind of just a struggle that we have there. And I kind of, my general complaint with the end is that I wish we would have gotten more. Like, I feel like there's more setup that Brandon could have done. There's more explanations that we could have seen leading into the finale. Again, kind of going back to the Willia thing. I think we could have done more to set her up as the villain.
Yep.
Even though it's clearly the Bog that is the real villain. But like, I think we could have set that up a bit better, but alas.
The real villain was the Bog in the woods all along. Yeah, much better than the beginning. Pretty much agree with Cameron there in terms of wanting a bit more setup throughout in terms of the angel and the sister Wylea, Lila, Wayla, whatever. I am 3 hours ahead. I am on 10 p.m. time right now. And yeah, I just liked the banter about the T-tin and the fact that he emphasizes that more than the literal angel in the basement whose throat was slit, unfortunately.
I agree with both of you. I don't think it was like the super huge twist that I felt it was being made out to be throughout the rest of the story. Like, oh, who's behind it? Who we've been saying is behind it the whole time. But yeah, it was cool. I think left a lot of things open for more cool stories to be told, and yeah, it was as good of an ending as I could have expected from the rest of the story, I think. All right. Any other themes that stood out to you?
So I got a quote, and that kind of leads into mine, and that's it was often, this is Davriel talking. It was often their first instinct to try and hit him with destroying light. They were also certain that secretly he was some kind of unnatural monster rather than just a man, the most natural monster of them all. And I think that kind of ties into like the major theme of perception versus reality. That like people want to view Davriel as this villain, and so they see him as one. Where really he's just this guy that wants to chill and enjoy some tea. Like he's literally just trying to not get noticed by anyone because he doesn't want to get wrapped into a plane destroying war with the entity. And so like, and kind of with that, I think one of the major ones is like fake it till you make it. And I think there's like this multi-layer here that like Davriel is like putting up this front to kind of present himself as this strong, imposing force, so that people will leave him alone. Where really like, as far as like magic goes, he's not even that powerful. Like he has an interesting power set, but it's kind of bad because it like leaves him in pain when he like steals spells from people, which is kind of interesting. But like, so he has like that side of like the fake it till you make it kind of thing. But then there's also the other side of it where he's trying to fake himself into being this lazy person. when he does have all of this power and he has the entity in his head being like, hey, we could destroy this whole thing. You want to do it? Like,
Nah.
and so it's kind of interesting to see. He's like, it's like almost like a double agent kind of thing. Like he's presenting himself to be one way, but the real him is almost more of the fake. And he, or it's like that's like the him that he's trying to run from is who he's presenting himself as. And so there's some interesting like perceptions going on.
Self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Self-sabotage is a solid theme. I think, I mean, that sense of duality really is the one thing that I mentally keep coming back to. In terms of themes, I really just wish there was more interaction between the sisters to sort of play off that of what's sort of going on throughout of, you know, these two combating forces. Um, in a way. Not in the, you know, fire and ice sense, but in this two pieces make a whole. And I think that's also part of it in terms of themes is like the things that make you whole aren't necessarily what you think they are. Like what you need and what you want are not always the same. And you have to go for what you need before what you want, even if it's sucky, even if it's broccoli and peas and carrots. You gotta eat your veggies before you get your dessert.
Anything else that stood out to you or any quotes to share?
Yeah. I have another one. I kind of reference this throughout, and this kind of even ties in with the idea of perception versus reality. But this is High Water talking about Davriel and kind of the bargains. Because he didn't care what I looked like. He summoned me specifically because he thought I'd be good at doing his ledgers. And he was right. I am good at contracts. I've always prided myself on that. And it has made me an excellent steward. I'm not ashamed of what I am or how I look, but it's nice to be recognized for something else. A thing I've always prided myself on, but virtually every other person, mortal and demon alike, has ignored. And so I like that quote because I think it says a lot about how we view other people, of course. We see people as like one thing, but they're way more. There's way more to them than that. But like from a character standpoint, it very much hits into this idea of like Davriel is good at seeing the good in other people. I mean, defining good and whatever works for him in the moment, of course. But like, and I think that that's really interesting that he like comes at this as like, oh, he is the person that can notice this unique thing about this person where other people would miss it. And then, of course, like I think for us, there's that challenge of like, how can we find that other thing that somebody else is really passionate about, somebody else really cares about. And like we don't necessarily get to see that all the time because it doesn't get brought out.
I do have a funny quote to share. This was, I believe, in the midst of the conversation about demon contracts and seduction, etc.
Etc. Etc.
It says, she looked at Tassinda again, who couldn't believe this conversation was still going on. And I was just like, girl, same.
What a vibe.
What a vibe.
What a vibe.
All right. After reading Children of the Nameless, do you have plans or desire to read any more Magic of the Gathering lore.
Magic the Gathering lore. Not anytime soon until I get into the game. I'm trying to remember if one of the various books I'm in the midst of reading is a Brandon Sanderson book or not, though. And I don't remember.
So for me, yes, definitely. Um, there are definitely some good jumping in points if people are ever interested in what there is. And so I can definitely recommend some stories there. But if nothing else, I'll recommend the Boom comics. It's a very fun, almost like alternate universe version of Magic. In the sense of like there are characters that die in that story that are alive in the main story, and vice versa. And so it's kind of their own rules, but it's a very fun representation of what's going on in the Magic lore, and so definitely recommend that. And then there are some very fun like set stories or more general side stories that are very cool too.
Okay. So I do have plans to read more of his writing officially because he's the author that wrote the last couple of Wheel of Time books for Robert Jordan, who passed away from cancer before finishing the series, and that is the series that I am in the midst of reading. So, I will be reading more of his works. Just his works in that regard are guided by very detailed notes of another author.
Yeah, I think I would definitely read more Magic the Gathering lore. I think it's so rich. There's so much to explore. Um in like Cameron was saying, like so many different genres and stuff basically as well too, with all the different planes that exist. Um as for more Brandon Sanderson, I had specifically planned not to read more Brandon Sanderson before we decided on this novella. And
Gotcha.
now that is a hard and fast rule. You cannot make me. I will not do it.
Noted.
Any
No more
final?
Sanderson for Shanine.
No. No.
No more.
Final thoughts.
So as much as like the beginning of this book could definitely use some work. I think that this is a good place to jump into Magic lore. Like it is so segregated in the sense that it does make a lot of references to other things, but you don't have to know those to get through, which I think is a very good benefit of this book. And so, um, especially in that regard, I definitely recommend it.
Agree. If you're someone who is into Magic the Gathering or are at all interested in the lore behind it, this is a relatively short read to get into and is generally enjoyable as far as the lore goes.
Yep.
Alrighty. Um, we are switching up genres for this coming month on book club, we decided on a nonfiction one this time. So on March 30th, we will be discussing Living Resistance, an Indigenous Vision for Seeking Wholeness Every Day by Caitlin B. Curtis. I forgot to look up how to say her last name before the podcast. I think it's, I'll make sure I know how to pronounce it next month.
And I'll add there, Living Resistance will be our 10th book club since our last tier list. And so after that, we will be returning to the tier maker,
the tier list,
and adding these 10 books to that.
This book also comes out on March 7th, so very stoked to read a new release. And something by an Indigenous Christian author. So that'll be very fun. I have another of her books on my TBR that I have heard good things about as well. So I'm excited to be reading this one. All right. This has been First Geek 411's Book Club. Thank you all for joining us. Again, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as OneGeek411. Come join our Discord server. Check out our Redbubble store. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. And watch live on Twitch and find all our videos over on YouTube. You can find me at Hoot and Howl Tales, TALES on Instagram, and the Hoot and Howl on Twitter.
You can find me at I am not prepared with an I on all platforms.
And you can find me as Humar Witzel.
Eat some cheese.
Read a book.